Vanderbilt University professor James Lawson recently commemorated the 5th anniversary of 9/11 by accusing the United States of pathological behavior that led to the attacks.
The United States is the #1 enemy of justice and peace in the world. We have denied, for example, the genocide against Native Americans. We have denied domestic violence as being a serious disorder in our midst. We have denied the effects, the spiritual, moral effects on our character of things like slavery and racism. And I suggest that as a consequence, there is in the United States a kind of pathological character, spirituality, if you would, that does not allow us to accept the human race or to accept the world as it is.
Joining us now is University of Minnesota professor Jim Fetzer. Jim, do you believe that the United States is an enemy of justice and peace, as suggested there?
Sean, I can't believe I'd have the occasion, but you have foxed your facts again. I wasn't asked to endorse what they said. I was asked to comment on it, and in my opinion, they don't know enough about 9/11 to be able to offer thoughtful reflections.
I just asked you, just heard a comment. I'm just asking you a very simple question. Don't melt down on me like Bill Clinton here, whether or not you agreed with that statement. Do you think America's an enemy of justice and peace?
Well, in many contexts, America has been. Our history reveals mass genocide at the origins when we slaughtered some 12 to 16 million Native Americans. Our middle history was dominated by slavery, by kidnapping, bringing hundreds of thousands of Africans to the United States against their will. So certainly a case could be made.
Nobody's talking. We're talking about in the context of this being comments on the 5th anniversary of 9/11. Do you believe America is a good country and a force for good around the world?
America today, given what we know about 9/11 and our exportation and use of terrorism at home and abroad, actually appears to be a force that is promoting terrorism rather than combating it, as even the National Intelligence Estimate reflects, Sean.
Yeah, well, I got to tell you, this is what's really pathetic, Professor, and I mean this with all due respect. The fact that I find people with you and these views in positions of power, and I see that you have a captive audience of students, and they've got to listen to this drivel, is disturbing to me, but you're entitled to your opinions. What is your belief system? You think that the government planned 9/11? Do you buy into these bizarre conspiracies?
I don't have a captive audience, Sean, and it's outrageous for you to say that when you had Dick Cheney on this show, who had a major role by not even convening the anti-terrorist task force in the 5 years he was responsible for it before 9/11.
Do you think Dick Cheney or the government's responsible for the 9/11 attack?
It appears to have been, Sean. We discovered major indications that the Twin Towers were brought down by a sophisticated kind of controlled demolition. They were blown up from the top down.
Let me ask more specifically, Jim.
Building 7. Bill, Sean, let me answer your question.
What role did Dick Cheney have in the 9/11 attacks, in your view?
Well, Norman Mineta testified that Dick Cheney was in control in an underground bunker beneath the White House when a young aide came in to report, sir, it's 50 miles out, sir, it's 30 miles out.
So you believe that he was directing the 9/11 attacks?
The orders still stand, and Cheney turned on him and said, of course the orders still stand. Have you heard anything to the contrary?
The order had to be
to not shoot the plane down.
Because our time is limited.
The order had to be to not shoot the plane down.
To understand exactly what you believe. You think this was a controlled demolition. It was not Al-Qaeda. It was not people who want to kill us from abroad. It was Dick Cheney in a bunker directing an attack on the United States.
Well, Alan, there are massive motives at work here. The day before 9/11, Donald Rumsfeld reported to Congress that the Pentagon lost track of $2.3 trillion. Larry Silverstein had insured the World Trade Center for $3.5 billion. Halliburton stood to gain $100 billion
no-bid contracts. That was a yes or no question. Was Dick Cheney responsible for directing an attack on the United States, yes or no?
Dick Cheney had a major role here, along with Donald Rumsfeld, Condoleezza Rice, Donald Fife, Paul Wolfowitz, General Richard Meyer, Rudy Wolfowitz, and Larry Silverstein.
To say that these guys wanted to attack our country, in spite of the fact I don't agree with their policies, I don't agree with how they prosecuted the war on terror, but to say that they are behind it, or that they wanted to attack us and killed 3,000 Americans, is so far beyond the pale to defy credulity.
Alan, the government story isn't even physically possible. It violates laws of physics and laws of engineering. You haven't even faced up that not even the NIST can explain the demolition of Building 7, which Larry Silverstein directed take place by telling a fire commander that there'd been so much death and destruction, perhaps the best thing to do is to pull it. They made the decision to pull, and they watched the building come down.
Last question.
Dan Rather and Peter Jennings on the scene at the time said it looked just like a controlled demolition, and nothing looks more like a controlled demolition than a controlled demolition.
Do you teach this theory in your class?
I'm now retired, Sean, frankly. I have taught 35 years logic, critical thinking, and scientific reasoning, but I'm devoting myself full-time to these efforts because the American people deserve to know the truth about what happened to their nation on 9/11. In every single major respect, we have proven the government's report is false.
Coming up next, Cowboys.